will give a virtual letter or note of gratitude to each of you, since gratitude was the theme of starting the program. Okay. You hear me now? Is that better? Okay, so to each of you, a virtual note of gratitude. It's a pleasure to be here when you ask me to talk to this esteemed group. I jumped on that opportunity, and I do consider it a privilege to talk about some of the kinds of things we do in OCAST. And by the way, how many of you have heard of OCAST? How many, by show of hands? Okay. All right. There's some in the audience not familiar with OCAST, so there'll be an exam at the end of my... How many of you have heard of OCAST when I complete my talk? So we're the state's agency for technology development, technology transfer, and technology commercialization. Heavy focus on, oh, we have charts up now. Okay. Sure. I thought I was going to do this without charts, and I think there's a copy in your packages as well.
Do you need a clicker?
Yes. If you go to the next chart, please, if you can. So, there's ethics in science and technology, and you think about how technology affects our lives. Think back 10 years. The iPhone is 10 years old, right? It's 10 years old this month. Hashtag is 20 years old. So how many of us use these devices now, and look at the next generation of device? When Apple introduced the iPhone, you think about how quickly it went from iPhone 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 7 coming up, how fast we were looking at 3G technology, 4G technology, 5G. Now we're waiting on 5G. So it'll be at least 10 times faster than our current devices. So each of us has 10 times more computing power in this smartphone as an IBM mainframe had in 1975. Okay? What do we do with all this data? We have access to the data. What do we do with it? Okay? And then if we look at what's coming up, if you look at the internet, let me go back to my charts. I did that one. Can we go to the next chart? Okay. OCAST purpose in life, its mission, is to diversify, grow Oklahoma's economy. So in 1987, OCAST was launched as a response to a downturn in oil and gas. Our state was suffering in the early 1980s. We had, thank you, Shannon. We had a downturn in oil. We were also in a downturn of banking industry, of oil and gas, banking and housing, real estate down. So our state legislators, some state legislators had a vision. We need to do some things that will increase You think that our state is more diversified now than 1985 or 87 or in the 90s and 95. To look at the innovation district that's coming out of including the medical center at the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center, Administration Hospital, Dean McGee Eye Institute, the Research Park, the University going west toward Automobile Alley. That's being Innovation District. So the focus being on research and development specifically, or including a large part of that will be medical science. How big is Oklahoma in the medical science in the research arena? Those who visit our state sometimes don't think we have that much capability in science and technology, specifically in medical science. If you look at the capabilities at our hospitals, at our research centers, University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center, Dean McGee Eye Institute, the Oklahoma Medical Research Foundation. I'm a board member there. Leading edge work going on to find cures for dreaded diseases. Diseases such as lupus, Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, Crohn's disease. Some of you might have read 2 weeks ago, just before the first of the year, that one of our Oklahoma companies, Selexis, developed a drug therapy for sickle cell anemia, and that company was acquired on an exit by Novartis for $658 million. Okay, so that our strategic partner I2E led that investment through contract. I2E is under contract to OKC to do commercialization and venture capital. Good things in the state. This is a quote from Thomas Friedman. You probably read Thomas Friedman's book, The World is Flat. How many of you read that book? One of the stations just this week talking about the next generation of things we can expect. Look, the world is flat. Guess what? There's a mention of OKC, okay, on page 244. And it talks about, he's talking about innovation, focusing on innovation. And you take a state where you normally wouldn't think that innovation, and that a state that doesn't have a reputation as being a bastion of science and technology. And Oklahoma has the Oklahoma Center for the Advancement of Science and Technology, which is essential and diversity economy. By collaborating, by partnering, and by bringing some common platforms for our research universities. We have very good research universities in this state. As defined under the definition of a comprehensive state university, we have 3 universities that meet that definition. University of Oklahoma, Oklahoma State University, and Tulsa University. Oklahoma University's program in weather science and radar is among the tops in the nation, if not the very top. Oklahoma State University's strength is in unmanned systems. Last year it established a program that grants baccalaureate degrees, master's degrees, and a PhD in unmanned systems. So, and I'll talk a little bit about unmanned systems a little more. And if you think about the University, how many people knew that cybersecurity is their strength? And Tulsa University is typically recognized as being one of the 5 best universities in the United States for cybersecurity. Okay. So you take those collective capabilities, and we have a lot of research capability in the state, in addition to the things that our research foundations do. The Oklahoma Medical Research Foundation, the Warren Foundation in Tulsa, doing brain research at the Laureate Center, Brain Research Center. So a lot of things going on in the state. And in terms of OKC, we're now, as Oscar mentioned, and over 30 years, we've given about 2,600 grants. These are research and basic and applied research grants. Research grants are pretty complicated, so those are a lot of grants. There are National Science Foundation light grants for things such as the diseases that are the Oklahoma Medical, as well as the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. $270 million. That's resulted in a return of some $5.8 billion of economic impact, because those projects create jobs. They were high-paying jobs that researchers typically have, and so our cumulative return on our investment is 21 to 1. So quite, we're recognized as a national model for technology-based economic development. So we're growing industries in our state beyond oil, and oil and gas will always be a staple in our state. But what about medicine? What about agriculture? What about information technology. What about manufacturing? 130,000 people work in manufacturing in this state. So how do we develop the next generation of manufacturing capabilities? 3D printing, sensors, robotics. We're seeing all of those things, and we're actually promoting all of those things. So how do we build that sustainable growth trajectory and sustainable economic impact? So this is our partnership. We call this Oklahoma's Innovation Model. It's a public-private collaboration consisting of OCAST as a state agency, I2E as our strategic partner doing technology commercialization and venture capital activity. The Oklahoma Manufacturing Association to help us do manufacturing, leading edge manufacturing, and the New Product Development Center at the University, at Oklahoma State University. Research needs to have a societal benefit, and Oscar mentioned the Alan Alda Center for communicating science. And one of the things we do, and that center does, is make sure research has a societal impact and societal value. What does that mean? That means there are ethical considerations there. There are codes of conduct. There are codes of conduct that must be adhered to, guiding principles that need to be incorporated into and designed into any engineering work, scientific work, and it must have a trust of the public. Okay, you cannot violate the public trust. Technology changes everything, right? I remember when I was in high school, and some of you may remember too, when we talked about a tablet, it was a Big Chief tablet. Remember? Okay. With the line, yellow pages with the lines. Now, a tablet, computer. And here we have all of these devices. And so each of us, we grow up in this world now where we want more speeds. You know, we want the next generation power that gigablast to down 1 gigabit per second, so speeds. So technology changes everything. In 1899, to give you an idea of how fast we're moving, Charles Duell, who was the commissioner of patents during that time, said everything that has been and can be invented has been invented. Okay? He certainly didn't foresee the advent of the internet and even the automobile. Okay? So where we evolved to now, social media. Okay? All of these things that we have at our fingertip. Okay? Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube and all of the Siri kinds of things that we become accustomed to and sometimes take for granted. Okay. This is a quote by Michael Porter, who's at Harvard. He's an academic and economist and author. He says, innovation is the central issue in economic prosperity. Okay? And I think we would all agree with that. How do we innovate? Innovation simply means doing things differently. It could mean a new product, it could mean a new process, or it could mean a new service. Okay? This is a shot from, we're talking about the globe, the world expanding, the universe expanding. And so this is a shot of the Earth from the surface of Mars. Okay? Mars is 50 million, the closest point, farther than that, if you, depending on your aphelion, perihelion, but 50 million miles away. So you see the Earth as this little dot, okay, from the surface of Mars. Now, we start thinking about that. How big is this universe? Okay. And how much exploration are we starting to do? How can might we at some point be able to mine precious minerals from asteroids? Okay. So you think about what's possible, okay? And the question now is there a ninth planet? And you've heard some of the discussion about Pluto was delisted as a planet, so we're back to 8, but we think there's another planet out there based on mathematical calculations. Okay, I haven't really seen it yet, but it's probably out there, could be out there. So then we start thinking about the art of the possible. What's possible? And so we start to see convergence science and science fiction. Harry Potter. Remember the invisible cloak? Okay. In Harry Potter movies? Okay. And when we saw the invisible cloak, we says, okay, people started thinking, is that possible to do? Well, the military is working on invisible uniforms for our service members. Okay, so you might have an invisible army, and it has to do with light scattering, so could be upon us at some point. This is Elon Musk Hyperloop. The Hyperloop can attain speeds of 750 miles per hour conceptually. Now we've still got to do the design work, but it's pulled through a tube at 750 miles per hour, so you get from Los Angeles to LA in about 20 minutes or so. Okay, and this has huge compressors on both ends, so it pulls the train through this tube, pylons. All the engineering would have to be done to do. Conceptually, is it impossible? Again, the art of the possible. Can we do it? These are. This is a drone. How many of you saw 60 Minutes Sunday night? We talked about drones. You saw the program, and it talked about the military using drones, and not only drones from that are air, but also the ones that are on ground and the sea. Remember the one that's called Sea Hunter? It's actually an autonomous vessel that the Navy would use. And by the way, the U.S. Navy has now expanded its mantra. Remember, they used to say land, sea, and air. Now they've added space to those two, so it's land, sea, air, space, and cyberspace. That's where they have to operate in. So now drones can be used to deliver pizzas. Domino's is looking at delivering pizzas. Amazon could deliver packages to your door using a drone. So in the 60-minute presentation Sunday night, it talked about all these swarming drones that could be deployed from an F-16 or F-35. Okay, and so you could have hundreds of these things, and they're surveillance. They have surveillance cameras, listening devices on them that could be used by the military in certain theaters of war or surveillance activities. So there are 1.5 million drones operating in this country now. You go to the malls during Christmas, and you see the boxes of drones out there. Some are more sophisticated than others, but those are upon us. And as we know, some of the conversation going on around drones is, does it violate principles of privacy? Okay, so could someone use drones to spy on people and those kinds of issues? So those issues have to be worked out. But think about using a drone in emergency situations, first responder systems, monitoring our infrastructure to make sure it's working, to make sure it isn't compromised. A lot of beneficial uses for drones, and so it will develop, and it will have to develop along ethical lines and guiding principles associated with drones. The FAA does control the use of drones in terms of airspace. And precious automobiles, these are autonomous automobiles that we're starting to see. You know that there was Uber was experimenting with vehicles in Pittsburgh, driverless vehicles, and at those in 4 or 5 years we could see even more, not even more, but the use of drones, not drones, autonomous vehicles with all these sensors on them, with all of the kinds of electronics that you could put on these automobiles. And so Uber and Lyft, and now there's a company I believe in California called Chariot. Chariot is a passenger service, and Chariot is run by females, and they only pick up female passengers. Okay, and you think about why would there be that kind of niche in that market? Okay, safety. Okay, where are the technologies going in the future? What do we see? We see the drone activity will increase. Big data and data analytics will increase, including cybersecurity, electronics, in terms of autonomous vehicles, the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things means your device is all connected, your home. Devices can be connected through the Internet of Things, 3D printing, robotics, artificial intelligence, wearable technology, Fitbit, GPS shoes. So if you're a runner, you can wear shoes and they will actually have sensors in them and kind of give you a signal as to which path to take. Okay? And those are coming to market now. Smart football uniforms, athletic uniforms with sensors to protect the participants. Virtual and augmented reality, okay? And some of you who've experienced augmented reality goggles, it's quite an experience. Well, that's becoming more and more commonplace. The virtual reality piece as well, avatars, next generation operating systems and platforms. 10, what's beyond Windows 10, don't know, but there'll be operating systems out there and that will connect our devices, make our devices faster, and battery technology. The military, very interested in battery technology, lithium-ion batteries. What is the next generation? Could be lithium sulfur, but whatever it is, we need better batteries, better higher power densities, faster charging batteries to operate automobiles, as an example. So if we look at where the jobs going to be in the future? Bioscience and healthcare. Why in healthcare? Why is healthcare going to grow to be elder care industry in our nation and across the globe will be big, right? Because we're getting older as a population. So elder care opportunities are out there for entrepreneurs and people who want to be in that space and take care of our older population. I think we're now sitting at 76.1 average lifespan for males and about 86.3 for females. Okay, and that's even increasing. So how do we take care of our older population? Information technology will be huge. Cybersecurity. Aerospace is going to be huge, including moving from aerospace to outer space. International space stations, the Mars, and we're now looking at, NASA's looking at extended space stay on Mars. Again, 50 million miles out. How do you put life on Mars and allow people to stay there for extended periods of time? Electronic sensors, lasers, next generation manufacturing, you mentioned advanced composite or nanomaterials, both traditional fossil fuel energy as well as renewable energy, solar, wind. I think in Oklahoma, the last I saw, we have 5.4 million, 5,400 megawatts of energy in our state that we can put into the grid. That's about equivalent to 2 nuclear power plants. So we have a lot of wind in Oklahoma. I think we're number 4 or 5 in terms of wind industry. A lot of wind. Okay. So in the 21st century, how do we compete? Whether you call the 21st century the global economy, the digital economy, the knowledge economy, however you want to describe it, compete in that global economy, in the knowledge economy, because jobs are moving from farm and factories to the knowledge economy. So it depends on what you know becomes important to a potential employer. The 21st century workforce will be different. By 2025, 70% of all jobs will require training and education beyond high school. Okay? So how do we instill that into our young people, and how do we prepare for that eventuality and that reality? The 20th century workplace. Venue will change, more openness in the work environment. The new GE facility on 10th Street There are only 2 offices in there that are closed offices, walled offices, and that's Michael Ming, who will be, and the HR person. The rest of those offices are open space so that people can collaborate and can share ideas and talk about cognitive visions to create the next generation of product, next generation of processes. So we're creating that next generation of scientists, engineers, attorneys, physicians, politicians, innovators, business folks, finance folks, and entrepreneurs. So ethics standards, operating principles, and culture, creating a culture of guiding, of ethics becomes very important. So leaders need to be focused on principle-centered leadership, honesty, truth, legal, and transparency. And many of your professions are governed by codes of conduct. So I listed a few of these, and in to see Hippocratic oath, military oaths, support and defend our Constitution, state and national bar associations for a Society of Professional Journalists, SPG, their code of ethics, honest, fair, and courageous. Engineers, National Society of Professional Engineers, there's a code of conduct there, right? So, if we look back in time, a brief history of time through some issues that we're probably pretty familiar with, the Tylenol story. How many of you remember that story when Tylenol had its capsules contaminated with cyanide? Well, how did Tylenol, J&J, respond to that? Very positive. They took all of those capsules off the market, and this was an isolated case. It was only in Chicago. There were 7 deaths, but the response to this was very ethical, very responsive, responsible. They pulled all of the Tylenol, extra strength Tylenol, off the market, repackaged, so into a non-contaminated or into a bottle that you couldn't easily contaminate and inject with cyanide. Good story. Martin Thiokol. Some of you remember the Challenger when it blew up upon landing, upon launch, and 7 astronauts were killed. And the cause of that was an O-ring that was produced by Martin Thiokol. And one of the engineers at Martin had warned them not to use that particular O-ring, but for expediency, whatever, the Challenger launched, blew up on the launch pad because of a ruptured fuel tank. Bridgestone, some of you may remember when Bridgestone had the problem with its tires, 6.5 million tires were deployed, resulting in 200 deaths, 700 injuries. A lot of money it cost Firestone, not only just in terms of money, but in terms of public relations. And its branding was affected. It took them a long time to recover from that. Philip Morris, its study in the Czech Republic, cited a report that by Arthur Little Consulting Company, and it said that there are beneficial effects of smoking, that the healthcare consequences, there were positive consequences associated with people smoke because they would die earlier and wouldn't have to be cared for over the long term. And they even put a value on it, $147 million. Okay, so when those things happen, was that ethical? Well, certainly wasn't. And you learn from those kind of things. So let's not repeat that. Enron and Kinley. Many of us remember that event when Kinley actually was found guilty of money laundering and activities that were not sound, okay, and bankrupt the company, betrayed shareholders, and led to Sarbanes-Oxley and some of the accounting regulations that we see today, destroyed Arthur Andersen at the time. Okay, WorldCom and Bernie Ebbers, same kind of thing, securities frauds, conspiracy, false regulatory filings inflated the value of WorldCom by some $11 billion, and he used some of that money to invest in other ventures. So those are some examples. Merck recall of Vioxx, some of the ones that are really impactful and affected a lot of people, and were good examples of unsound behavior. Baylor University football program, they're still going through that now with violations of principles of ethical conduct, and they're under NCAA investigations and probably facing a lot of lawsuits. Shannon mentioned fake news about a month ago when we were talking, and so now it's just escalated, this thing of fake news. This morning I was watching the TV and they were talking about BuzzFeed. And how many of you have heard of BuzzFeed? Okay, a lot of people in the audience, and too familiar with it, but BuzzFeed apparently released some data about ties to some of our politicians to Russia. And so the BuzzFeed picked it up and says, well, they cautioned you, and this has not been substantiated, but it's out there. And unfortunately, sometimes what we read, we assume is true. What we read is true sometimes, and some people interpret it that way. And you might remember that about Christmas, you remember the story that they had on Twitter that Britney Spears had died? Okay. And Sony Music got hacked, and the story went viral. Okay. And so a lot of people took it to be true. It wasn't. And then there was a fake report about the Israelis taking a preemptive strike against Pakistan, a nuclear preemptive strike. Okay? And Pakistan responded to it because when they read it, they thought, well, it could be true. Okay? Well, it wasn't. Wells Fargo, with its scandalous sales practices, the Samsung Note 7. How many of you had a Samsung Note 7? Nobody's going to admit it, right? And with the batteries exploding, and Samsung had to recall all of those, what is that going to cost them in public relations? Product. Not only their iPhones, their phones, but in all of their product lines. I think there were even some instances where Samsung's refrigerators had caught fire. Standards, professionalism, culture. How do we build that culture in an organization? How do we take ethics as a personal as well as organizational responsibility? Okay. Because as technology evolves, the pace of technology increases, how do we make sure that ethics, sound operating principles, infused in vision for getting to higher levels of technology? So I had a boss one time in AT&T, and he had a quality meeting, and this always resonated with me. And he just says, do good things. Okay. So I think it was a good capture, a bottom line, do good things. That means you do the right things, you do ethical things, you do things based on principle, you do things based on the kind of culture that you, as a leader of a company, has to be driven from top down. And so with that, there's my contact information for anyone who may need to contact me for any reason. And I think, Shannon, we'd have some time for maybe a little interactive piece, do we? Okay. Any questions, comments, observations about the things that you've seen in terms of science and technology? Again, as we start to look at science and society, science and ethics, science and religion, they're not necessarily juxtaposed, right? They should be a symbiotic kind of relationship. So based on what you've seen, what I presented here today, any questions about the future of science and the rapidity of technology? Any question? Okay.
Do you think it's professional for the president to be communicating using Twitter?
if the question was, do you think it's professional for the president-elect to be communicating through Twitter? You know, that's one of those areas that I very often don't get into the political arena. So it's a good question. Any of you want to answer that question? I don't personally do Twitter. So. That's why I don't get into the other question was, does Barack Obama communicate through Twitter? You know, it is a platform that I think a lot of people use, and I think we need to use it responsibly. Because again, you know, if you read something on Twitter, whether it's Barack Obama's or whether it's President-elect Trump's or anybody else's, you know, a lot of people, particularly millennials, tend to take these things more differently than the baby boomers, okay? Then you got Generation X in there, and you know, what we put out there can be interpreted and even edited by someone else, and now it goes viral, right? So it becomes true. At least we think it's true. I think, Jeff, did you have a okay. Oh, Tom.
So the issue of technology and whether it's used ethically has always been a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a general case can be made that technology is not in and of itself ethical or unethical or moral. Immoral, it's the use of technology.
The use of it. Mm-hmm.
So as we as business people or you and OCAST, as we are promoting the development and advancement of technology, what do you perceive as our responsibility for how that technology is then used?
I think understanding the capabilities of technology, and Oscar mentioned the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science. I think some of that goes into the scientists who create the technology, understanding how society is going to use that technology. Certainly there are downsides, but typically it's for beneficial uses. The internet was for the benefit of communications, ready access to information to help inform decision making. Now, is there a downside to it? Sure. You know, people use it as a platform to communicate negative, what can be interpreted as negative messages. But the beneficial use, it's just like drones, another example. Drones have a lot of beneficial uses, but if you look at how people have used them and they're out in the, you know, if they're flying around spying on people, then that's was not the use that they were intended for. So understanding science, understanding society, understanding the rules, the regulatory kinds of requirements and environment that we live in, or all kinds of things that the engineers, when they do these things, and scientists, when they explore the cause of diseases and recommend different kinds of drug therapies to cure those drugs. Where's the fiduciary responsibility? You know, what is the governing board? I have a governing board of 21 people. They're responsible. They have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure we're doing things in OCAST that meet the test of legality, meet the test of accountability, transparency. Shannon has a board, same kinds of issues. You know, how do we operate? Under what kinds of principles? Do the right things, do good things. So we do have those sinister purposes out there that unfortunately kind of go along with some of the technologies we will see. So again, it goes back, how do we use them? You know, so there's a personal responsibility piece in there that we just have to keep plowing away, and I compliment this group for continuing the conversation on ethical behavior, principle-centered leadership, doing the right things, and think about the consequences, negative consequences of an action that someone could have by putting an irresponsible message out over Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. You know, some of our kids are certainly affected by, you know, you put a picture out there and it goes viral, and you know, it's kind of too late to say, well, I'm going to retrieve it. Okay, it's gone. Okay, So I think it's part of that is education and awareness, and maybe that starts with K through 12 and teaching responsibility. We have information, access to this information. How do we use it responsibly? And certainly the parents, know what your kids are doing on their internet. And I was watching a program one night, and the parents sent their kids to, said, go to your room. The problem was they sent them to the room with the smartphone. So take the smartphone, and the message in this particular thing, take the smartphone away, because without guidance and without some rules, sometimes you have situations that may not be too positive. So I think communicating the advantages of technology, embracing technology, and if you're a company, you have to embrace that technology because it means competition, right? You have to have information. You need to have good information to make informed decisions. So tough questions for today. How different politicians would use Twitter or Facebook. Those are tough issues. And a lot of debate will continue to happen over that. So we'll just see where it goes. Shannon?
There's all this discussion about fake news and Facebook cracking down, but there's, I kind of like for you to talk about some of the ethical issues involved with that, because it's been such a point of contention. What do you see as some of the things they're wrestling with from an ethical standpoint in cracking down on fake news? Which, if Ted was here, he'd say that term is overused now. But
I know. Again, a very tough issue and very timely issue, because, as I mentioned, the report this morning on BuzzFeed, if you get accused of something and you think you've been accused unfairly, your tendency might be to respond to that. Okay, in responding to it, somewhat legitimized. Okay, you validated the person who might have accused you of doing something in the first place. So you really got to be careful about it, and I think responsible about it. Any other thoughts about that in the room? I mean, some of you have been around this organization and your own organizations. What are some of the perspectives on that, and how should it be handled? Any solutions? Into Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of those kinds of things. Questions that you can have. Little pod that people were buying over Christmas. The Google, and it picks up, if it's close to your TV, it would pick up the TV, things. So that technology, you have to know how to use it, how to space it. Thomas?
Do you think that maybe education is the key? Because I think the internet is the snake oil salesman of time past, and, and a lack of information and a lack of understanding of how to gather information then leads us to be gullible to whoever the first person at the table is.
Very true. I think, again, education and awareness of what you have as capability when you have one of these, and just think about how much access you have and how much power you have, when you go into Facebook and you go into all of these apps. And apps are the new economy. Pokemon Go, when whoever developed that app, a lot of money. I think that's Nintendo and Niantic who put that out to the market. And youngsters were just, going on these, what were you hunting, those little avatars, whatever they called them in Pokemon Go. And a number of youngsters and a number of people were killed as a result of chasing these icons. Okay. So how do you give instruction associated with those kinds of games? You have to put warnings out there that, this could lead to injury, or so. There's a responsibility that goes out there. So what is that next big app? There was one on paper, advertised this morning about if you were watching a sports program and they had the sound down, say you're in a sports bar, you have an app on there, and I think it's called, I don't know, it's not tinnitus, but it's something like that. But you take a picture of the sports screen in the sports bar, and then you get the sound over your phone, over your iPhone, okay? Just by taking that snapshot of it. So the phone then, the technology is electronics, will go immediately to an audible feed, okay? So where's the technology going? You know, what if we saw cure for vision defects, and so nobody goes blind anymore, and those people who were blind made to see? What would happen? You know, what are the ethics in that? What are the moral, religious? You know, but over time, I think science is progressing. That sure, we'll be able to cure Alzheimer's at some point. I think, Dr. Scooter, there's progression toward that, toward finding a cure. But Alzheimer's will be a greater and greater problem with our population because of why? We're getting older, okay? And the older we get as a population, it is that we will have dementia and neurological diseases. So if we could find that cure through research and have that magic pill, could we cure it? Yeah. I think that progress is being made on the research side. Certainly on the diagnostic side, you know, you can diagnose it, but now the issue is how do you cure it and treat it, okay? Any other comments, questions?
Okay. This is a very basic question. We were talking about Amazon using the drones to deliver instead of using people. What's the ethics with, this is a very basic question, but it gives the utilitarian. What happens when you develop technology so well that you make people laugh, that you make society as a whole more miserable because there's increased unemployment?
Yeah, the evolution of technology, I understand the question. What happens when you take people out of the equation? And so for those of you, I'll leave you with this. There's an app in and says it has to do with humans need not apply, okay? If you Google that, and humans need not apply, and it talks about it when humans will be relegated to doing work maintaining the robots, okay? Not doing the work, because you could actually do research with a programmed machine, artificial intelligence. Now we don't do, unless somebody get me, we don't do artificial intelligence at OCAS. A lot of scientists are warning against that, including Elon Musk, including Stephen Hawking, okay? Saying we should not go down that path. Well, competition says you probably need to go down that path because other countries are doing that kind of research. You know, how do you use robots in a constructive way? So bots in surgery, we can do, work is being done now on doing remote surgery. So the surgery team in St. Louis could operate on a patient in Oklahoma City, right? It's robotic surgery. Da Vinci surgery we have for prostate cancers. But you extend that to the next level, you know, operate remotely on a patient in another city. Okay, you just have to make sure that there's somebody in the room in case fail-safe device, you know, fail-safe person. But you're exactly right. You know, when jobs that we see are mechanical machines program. How many of you have seen the movie Rogue One, Star Wars Rogue One? Okay, the droids. You remember the droid that's in the movie, who's programmed? He talks human. It's a humanoid. Like far-fetched. Okay. They're working on what they call the new Army Mule, which is a robotic mule, which can carry loads up to 500,000 pounds. Okay. and can be programmed. The swarming drones that were on 60 Minutes last week, you remember they could actually self-assemble, so you could drop 100 drones from an F-16 or F-35 and they would assemble themselves so that they wouldn't run into each other. Okay? So they had 35 computers operating these things, sort of like a joystick, and with 50 million lines of code. Okay? So think about that possibility. Okay? And why was 60 Minutes showing that program? You say, well, that seems like it would be showing disclosing some of our trade secrets. Well, the people from the military addressed that and says, well, this isn't necessarily unique to the United States. The Chinese are working on the same thing. The Russians are working on the same thing. North Koreans are working on the same thing. So maybe it could be a deterrent because you say, okay, we have this capability. Sometimes what the military and DARPA will tell you is not exact. They're sometimes beyond what they tell you. Right? So, that's the kind of world we will live in. In terms of where will humans work going forward, the new jobs, and by 2025, again, will require education and skills beyond high school because somebody's got to program those machines, right? So there'll be no new set of jobs. So you have robots doing some kinds of tasks and people who have to program, who's going to oil the robots, okay? Who's going to take care and maintain the robots. So a new set of jobs that we haven't even thought about, technologies that we haven't even thought about yet. So as we develop those new technologies and new jobs, then the opportunity to have that discussion about ethics, guiding principles, human factors engineering, those all have to be addressed as part of the rollout of these kinds of technologies. Intellectual property, patents, sometimes we say patents are the new economy, and so intellectual property is money and will be even more important as we go forward.